Hi, everybody. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I am delighted to be talking with someone who works in the world of comics narratives, celebrating the stories of comics creators, and actually working for a publication called Comic Book Creator, of all things. And that is writer, educator, Greg Biga. Greg, thank you for jumping in and joining at the end of a long day in
No,
education.
no, absolutely, and thank you for allowing me to take part in this. I've certainly enjoyed some interviews that you've already done, so I'm
Well,
very
thank you.
grateful that you consider me to be a part of your program. It's very special for me. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. That's very kind, and thanks for checking out some of the episodes. You published with TwoMorrows Press, and you employ some really nice research and sort of exploring in your work as well. So lots to talk about there. But by means of a sort of an origins and connecting question, curious about what led you to comics and storytelling.
And for me, oddly enough, storytelling it's unique to me because I was one of those idiots who was always drawing. So my want was, and believe this or not, in second grade, I actually announced that I was going to be a teacher,
Great.
and that in my free time I was going to draw comic books.
And here you
So,
are.
unfortunately, obviously, you can't do both of those at the same time, and my abilities as an educator well outdistance my abilities with illustration. Um, Certainly, at the time of the mid 90s, where a 1970s looking fellow like me for illustration did not really live in the image world. So I was definitely outside of my time frame. I should have been born many years earlier for the style that I drew in, but thankfully that has kind of come back around in the process with TwoMorrows. So I'm very grateful to the Johns, John B. Cook and John Morrow,
Mhm.
for letting this old comic book fan join in with them. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. Along the way, have you had the chance to kind of reconnect those threads from some of your comic book reading early on to folks that you work with in profile now?
Very much so.
Yeah.
It's been very unique to be able to revisit my youth,
Hmm.
and have that come back around with individuals who were certainly highly thought of pros at the time, specifically with the artists, and a few of the writers as well. But now to kind of be the curator of their careers,
Hmm.
and I don't want to say this long into their career because these are individuals, many of them who are still extremely active, all of them still extremely talented. So it's been a lot of fun to reconnect with some of those individuals, people who I I'll just say I copied. I mean, I think that's the best way to say as a cartoonist, I copied a lot of them, um, and it's been a lot of fun talking to, um, gosh, just some absolute giants of the field,
Hmm.
and that they've given me some kudos and some appreciation and passed my name around has been pretty special.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I don't know about you, but just being sort of a person that interviews and explores comics a little bit, I found people to be very, very friendly for the most part that are part of
Very
the
much so.
comics industry. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was trying to think earlier on my drive. The school that I'm an administrator at is actually 60 miles from where I live.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I have a lot of time to kind of my interview stuff while I'm driving. That's part of my time during that 60-minute. I can't say 60-minute. That 60-mile drive through a canyon, which actually takes about 90 minutes every morning. Um, but it was kind of humorous as I was thinking about that over from my next project, and I was thinking about that on the drive, and I really started to think, man, is there anybody who I haven't enjoyed talking with? And
Yeah.
and to your point, I think there's just some really special individuals who are just, man, you just can't get enough of the quality conversation and the thought process that they have. It's been really rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. When you have a project, is there a particular process that you typically go through as far as research and kind of going about that?
Well, the I'll start with the big one, which is the John Severin book.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and where the whole process for me for that starts is when you, and I think you know the term, obviously breaking the back of a story. Even when you're doing the biography of somebody and you're doing the research piece and you're doing the interview piece, what's the thread going to be?
Yeah.
And for me, right up front, it was I had the opportunity for, in this case, John Severin's family got to speak with his eldest daughter, who lives in Denver. So she was about an hour and change away from me. And our conversation was about how she saw her dad as John Wayne.
Yeah.
And I saw her dad's artwork as a way that connected me with my dad. And our Saturdays going and collecting comics, and Severin was one of his guys.
Mm.
So right off the bat, it was about that familial action. It was her and her dad seeing him as a bigger than life person, and
Hmm.
for me, it was an attachment through my dad and how we were relating at all times through my teenage years. At any point in time, could always relate through that artwork. So our thread actually started right there with what does the family aspect look like, as opposed to even just the art. It was about the family aspect, and that paid huge dividends with the way that book worked, because it wasn't just about stating facts and stating time frames. It
Hmm.
was telling the story and telling the story about him growing up, as well as just the act of his love for his wife, which was all resonating with me and my dad and my mom. And for me, that was extremely unique. And as other individuals have shared, it's a really unique biography that was put
Hmm.
together by myself and John B. Cook, who is editor and also the individual puts forward comic book creator. But he and I come from two very varied backgrounds,
Hmm.
and we were able to really use what my strengths were, which are the conversational piece, which is where I stand out a lot more than other things that would be strengths, and his ability to go ahead and maneuver all the anecdotals that I was working with the opportunity that presents itself with him. He is the absolute best when it comes to research and marrying narrative with fact, and he did an exceptional job with that. So it was a very unique process. For me, as a first time writer, I've done a lot of things academic wise,
Hmm.
but as far as doing something biographical, it was very unique, and that was what broke the back, was going from family to how do we piece together the anecdotal narrative with the facts and the figures, and it was a pretty exceptional experience.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. You speak really well there to the creativity of nonfiction writing too, because I think sometimes people think, oh, even in academics, um, creativity is kind of a fiction thing, and it is, but you've got to have those beats, those threads, and that sense of a story to really make nonfiction work
No,
as well.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Educator question. Do comics and your work as an educator overlap? Do students know that you enjoy comics? Is that a point of connection, or is that something that you kind of keep as an at home, out of the way, not telling you about it
Oh
kind of thing?
goodness. Well, I think I don't want to say unfortunately, but when it comes with certainly teenagers now, the comics aren't the things that touch them; it's the movies
Oh yeah.
that catch their attention. Um, and this is based on your question. This is kind of another unique answer. Was I'll go back to the Severin book. I was a assistant principal and athletic director at a different school at the time, and when I reached out to John B. Cook about putting together a bio, it specifically was to include kids as researchers for me.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So one of the things that I will always do is I will choose something that is going to be a challenge for me or a goal for me. Because if I'm going to ask students to put aside some foolishness and make goals for themselves, I need model that. And
Yeah.
that's actually what I was doing at the time when I started the process on the book. Little did I know that my first meeting with kids, they had already spent about the previous 5 minutes looking at Wikipedia and then coming in and reading me the first couple sentences from Wikipedia. So I thank them for their help, uh, and ended up just taking that on myself. But um, as far as kids knowing about it, I definitely don't hide the fact that illustrative narrative is something that I've always enjoyed.
Hmm.
I was an art teacher prior to being an administrator. So that is definitely something that during my art teaching career was very much evident, and made certain that all art forms were treated as art with a capital A,
Hmm.
and that things did not get dismissed just because they were pop culture based. Um, I definitely don't hide it from kids. Um, some of them find it pretty interesting, and some of them just look at me and just like, that's maybe the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Coach. So it definitely varies as to their interest. That's for sure.
I could speak to that as well. Being an English teacher, sort of the comic book fandom sort of lives a little more on my sleeve. And when students walk in and they're like, "Oh, you have this signed print," uh, that creates that immediate conversation. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely,
Well,
definitely.
and I've had an opportunity, thankfully, to kind of marry that. My art teacher that I have currently at Florence Junior Senior, where I'm an admin at, I was able to have he's a good friend of mine now, John Bogdanov, actually
Mhm,
did
mhm.
a Zoom class with them
Oh,
during
that's
last
awesome.
year, literally right before Christmas, which I mean, I couldn't have been more fun to have Big John having conversations about his career and his life with Judy, and talking about comics and how he got into it, and why it was special. And he really had them hooked. They were really enjoying this conversation. So it was really cool to marry that, those two worlds together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And how great for your students to get to hear from people that are creating that way. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, John Bagdanov, you mentioned John B. Cook. Any other collaborations that have kind of stood out to you before we talk
Oh
about
goodness.
the vision moving forward?
I I would say, unfortunately, like a lot of people, whoever the last one is the one that was the most enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, when putting the stuff together on Severin, I had so many great conversations. Unfortunately, I had a lot of, in some cases, last conversations. So
Mm-hmm.
Marie Severin was wonderful to talk with. Marie, she was actually already in a home at that point in time, but to talk to her about her brother and the history behind them and her own career was really special. And she was sharp as a tack,
Yeah.
even at that time. Um, Paul Galassi is the first person that for the magazine I did an article on. So I did the bio on Paul, who's from Youngstown, Ohio. I'm originally from Sharon, Pennsylvania, so we're literally right next door to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it took a while for that to be a warm conversation. Very protective of things, very thoughtful of things.
Mm-hmm.
And we, again, with the breaking the back, we were talking about a trolley park that was in Youngstown that had since closed. And from that point on, we were suddenly fast friends. So
Nice,
it was a
nice.
lot of fun for that. Um, Dan DiDio, and I don't know if you've talked to Dan yet
I haven't.
or
I
interviewed
haven't.
Dan. Um, Two East Coast guys who have since relocated. And there was so much fun, so much laughing, and so much joy in that conversation. And it was not long after his exit from DC Comics as the head of DC when we had our conversation. So definitely was probably a little guarded going into that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but before 10 minutes were in, I mean, we were sharing as many stories as possible and just having a blast. And he's got a few things up his sleeve, obviously, working with Frank Miller now.
Mm-hmm.
And we've
Mm-hmm.
been able to, I think we've got a two-part bio on him coming out over here over the next couple of issues. Um, and I mean, it continues. I had the opportunity before he passed. Um, we were friendly before, but we definitely became very good friends with Tom Palmer,
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
tremendous, obviously tremendous inker is what he's known for, but an amazing painter and
Yeah.
working in advertising throughout the entire time he was still doing comics. Um, and became very close over our last his last few months, and our last conversation was actually about two weeks before he passed.
Wow.
But it was really special because he kind of took it as his time to really open up, and he used to joke with me. He was like, it's like, Greg, it's time for me to get on the couch. So we had just really just intimate, in-depth conversations that so went beyond obviously the topic of art, and the
Yeah.
individuals who spoke on him it was really special to have like Howard Mackey and Greg Wright, certainly Howard Chaykin, and obviously if you have not talked to Chaykin, everybody needs to talk to Howard Chaykin.
Yes, yes.
Um,
I would like to
just
set that up at some point.
Oh
Yes.
man, just and I know this is aside from what I was saying, but if ever there's an individual, even if you're not on the same page in a belief system or not on the same page with thought processes, he is so committed and comes from a place that is so genuine that
Yeah.
even if you're in disagreement, you want to hear what he has to say and you'll support what he says even if you're not in agreement with it, because
Hmm.
the man himself is absolutely authentic with what he shares.
Yeah.
So there's a plug for him, without a doubt. Talk to Howard if you can. But certainly him and Howard Mackey and Greg Wright, and had so many individuals talk about Tom. That was one of the more special things that I think I'll probably ever be a part of. Was being able to celebrate Tom, which will be coming out, I think in about I think two more issues for
Great,
that
great.
one, and one that's been ongoing, which was a real blast, was Mike Diodato.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I will say this, and he knows this. My 1990s time frame, I wasn't the biggest fan of the way things were going at the time, the over muscled figures and the height,
Yes. Uh-huh.
all that was going on, and Mike was one of those guys who took that image stuff and then multiplied it by 10, tried to put all the tricks on every page, kind
Right,
of
right.
thing. But it may be the sweetest hearted man. And we obviously become friends throughout that time. We've got one more. We did a 3-part bio that's coming out, and it was just, he did not hold anything back. There was tears and conversations between grown men while we were having those conversations, telling the story of specifically his relationship with his dad. Again,
Wow.
me and my dad, him and his. And that's one thing about people of this age. Obviously, you and I are similar in age, and talking to individuals who are slightly older, that is an automatic linchpin, and
Mm-hmm.
it just lets the conversation go almost immediately, and that was really special. And I would say that again and again and again with these conversations. But having individuals who have become genuine friends and people who have genuine care over me and my family has
Yeah.
been extremely special.
That's very cool. Very cool. And it sounds like you have a variety of interviews on the way, much more to come. And I mean, you're capturing history and these people's stories that
Absolutely.
otherwise might be here or there or non-existent. So that's valuable contribution. Any other future conversations that you want to give a nod to that you can before we talk about places where we can find the
Sure.
work?
Well, so I know that the next issue that is coming out, which should come out of Comic Book Creator, should come out by April, and that's a cover interview with Dan Jurgens. Again,
Mm-hmm.
I can't even say how much of a joy that was. That was actually broke up over 3 months, and there's some things that don't make it in just due to space. Um, but an absolute blast talking about small town history and how he's basically stayed right there in the Midwest and made himself not just a home but made himself a livelihood without ever having to travel the world, and
Mm-hmm.
bringing people to a unique place and unique storytelling and unique worlds right there in the Midwest. And it really is telling as to kind of his homespun growth, um, and how much he always places humanity in the stories that he's telling,
Mm-hmm.
which is really something that he and I talked about quite a bit. Is where you find the humanity in your storytelling, especially 40 years of pages later, how do you still find that? And
Hmm.
that was a really wonderful conversation. Um, there is a conversation that will be coming out with, um, I already mentioned about Dan DiDio,
Hmm.
um, Chuck Patton, who has gone
Very
from,
nice man. Yeah. Uh-huh.
he's a really
Yeah.
good guy. And we had such fun um, talking about his parlance going from the printed page to all his work working in animation. And man, we just, again, another fun conversation. If he would have been the last one, I'd have told you he's the best conversation I had. But like, having talked to him as you have, he's just such a really good guy, and really has a grounded feel about his own career.
Hmm.
And that was just a really thoughtful person to spend time with. Especially some of the topics we covered. He was a little surprised at some of them. I won't necessarily go into the revelation of those, but
Hmm.
um, he definitely took a pause and then dove right in with them. So it was really great that he took the leap of faith with me in some of those directions we went. Um, Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor. We
Nice.
have kind of a he said, she said piece that's going to be coming out soon. Had a chance to visit with them when they were here in the Springs. She's my daughter's favorite cartoonist.
Oh, cool.
So they got to spend some time together, which was pretty cool to
Hmm.
be able to
Hmm.
broker that. Um, and I know I could say this, there's a bigger one coming out, not bigger in importance of other things, but just page count wise.
Hmm.
I started doing an interview to do a bio on Alex Sinclair, who is simply just one of the great colorists that has ever existed.
Phenomenal. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously things would have progressed without him, but just like the Beatles, it got there a lot faster because Alex Sinclair exists.
Yes.
And during our conversation, which we were having up in Denver when he was here, it became very evident that no matter what, and this is partly due to him, is that you can't tell my story without my guys.
Mm.
And that has over this year, and actually starting March 11th, I'll actually be putting this piece together, um, has then included two conversations with Jim Lee, who was kind enough to lock me in on that schedule because that
Yeah.
is a busy guy.
Hmm.
So he locked me in twice to make sure that we could have a full conversation and get everything out that he wanted included. And then another conversation with Scott Williams. So it has now gone from just a shorter piece, just celebrating one person, to based on that one person's modesty, to be honest,
Hmm.
has turned into a much larger piece that celebrates the first 30 years of those three guys working together, as well as kind of their histories and the comparatives of growing up, and the stories that they have that are um, kind of alternating to tell their story about their youth, the things that they have in common, and the things that were totally unique to themselves. That's one that obviously I've been holding off on a little bit, just because I think issue wise we're about a year in arrears from
Hmm.
interview to print.
Hmm.
Um, so that one I know is going to be locking in here over the next couple issues, but that's going to be a larger piece. Like I said, a bigger one, but by page count, it's going to be a much larger piece than some that I've been doing recently.
Hmm.
Because John, bless his heart, John B. Cook, it's his magazine. He can
Uh-huh.
he could do that thing on his own if he needed to. Thankfully, he's got a lot of folks who are like me, who really just want to celebrate some people that who have been tag teaming with him. But if he wanted to run every main feature in every issue, he could do it. But thankfully, he's chosen to spend a little time with me to let me, take a few issues, and it's been really fun, not just because of the opportunity to talk to these individuals,
Hmm.
but John's my brother in arms. We always joke that we're the other brother from a different mother kind of thing, and it
Nice.
has been
Nice.
it has been the one of the most rewarding times, certainly as someone who wanted to be a part of the field,
Mhm.
to be brought in by John, and in some cases mentored by what he's doing with me as my editor. And as a friend, the way he has moved me on and encouraged me to be more than what I started being when he and I first met as a writer. So it's been this is weird to say. It's only been about 5 years since this whole process for me has been going. Uh, but man, if I could have pushed this 5 years, 10 years earlier, that would have been a heck of a lot more fun, the last 10 years. No offense to
Mhm.
education, but I think we all know what goes on in education, especially after COVID,
Yes.
and definitely come February, because the dog days of February just weigh everybody down. So it would have been a lot of fun earlier in my career to kind of have that as a conduit for some outside joy. But I could definitely say the last 5, it's just been an absolute gas to be able
Yeah.
to do this. It really has.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to the point on education, spring break is around the corner. So we're all holding in there, and I appreciate the work you do in education as well because that's very much needed.
I
Um,
appreciate it. I'll say this: our spring break for Colorado is super early. My district is the 11th of March.
oh wow, wow, that is
Yeah.
early. That is
So
early.
everybody else in the world is going 2 to 3 weeks later, but we'll be back at the grindstone when everyone else has got their time off. So
Yeah, yeah. So it really is right around the corner. Um,
literally, absolutely.
yeah. Well, by means of sort of the final official question, I'm supposing that Tomorrow's Publishing is the best place for people to go to check out the magazine, to check out the interviews, but any other spaces that you would point people to, or is Tomorrow's Magazine, the website, is that the go-to
So yeah,
spot?
so tomorrow's is definitely the first main and definitely the place to go, because they will have surprise sales that come up. So the ability to get things either in bundles or at a reduced rate after things have been out for a little while. I would always recommend going through the Tomorrow site.
Mhm.
Um, the As far as the Severn book, that's also available through Bud Plant, and Amazon and Barnes and Noble have that. But magazine wise, I would always say go through the Tomorrow's website, because as you're looking through that, you can also see Roy Thomas's alter ego.
Mhm.
You can
Mhm.
you can see the other variants that they've got, because I'm biased, but I think when it comes to the history of the field, it's really hard to say Tomorrow's is not at the lead of the pack. So I would always suggest going to the website.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll link that. I'll link the Bud Plant site for your book as well. And Greg, I appreciate the conversation. I'm glad to have you back anytime to talk about comics and creating and just kind of celebrating this thing that you and I both love.
No, I appreciate it, and obviously, I look forward to you editing me so I look better. So that
It's,
part I'm all for. You can do whatever tweaks you need to do. You have full permission. If
well,
you want to even if you want to superimpose like Denzel Washington over my face, by all means.
if that's an official request, I can see if I can make that happen. But I always tell people that anybody looks better next to me. It's like, just the comparison of like, well, we're looking at this guy, so let's look over here. So, um, but yeah, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the conversation. And I'll be in touch soon with links so you can check out the Denzel Washington superimposition and all of that.
Awesome, awesome, Jason. Hey, thank you for letting me come on with you. I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anytime.